All right, so I told you that I'm going to talk a little bit about community today. I'm going to get to that actually, but I'd like to make sure I set the tone and you understand kind of where I'm coming from in all of this. I'm coming from the premise that we're all fallen, that we're all broken, and I believe that as I look around in my own life, and I'm guessing that each and every one of you can look around in your own lives and think of things that you wish were different. You can think about ways in which you're frustrated with yourself, maybe with others, and perhaps even with God. That might be the case. And problem I've found is that if I don't take that condition of mine seriously, I allow it sometimes to run the show. And it's whenever whenever I forget that I am a powerless human being who is broken, who has a disease called sin, as soon as I forget about that, I start making decisions and doing things that are completely run by that part of me. And I think this is important to think about because I believe that all things, all my blessings, all the good things I have in life come from God. I think of that considering, I would say I think the three greatest gifts that probably you could think about in your own life would probably be your time, your treasure, and your talents. So, one of the greatest treasures we have is time. I was talking to somebody earlier just when I got here and talking about how it's so hard sometimes to make good use of time. And time is such a valuable thing. You only have so much of it in a day, and how am I going to use it? Of course, then you have your treasures, and for me, one of my greatest treasures would be my children. My son was sick. I had to take him to the ER yesterday, driving him to the hospital because he was having a hard time breathing. Scared me to death, and there's a treasure, But you also have, he's doing fine, by the way. He's doing really good after some antibiotic shots and steroids. He's bouncing off the walls just fine. So yeah, you can think of many treasures. Some people treasure their money and their other physical possessions. And then of course the talents. Treasure the things, the gifts that I believe God has given me. So there's some things that I'm good at, there's some things I'm not so good at. Some of those gifts that God's given me, what do I do with them? And really what I'm getting at here is the concept of stewardship. That's the technical term for it, stewardship. What do I do with the things that God has given me? And when I allow my diseased self to run the show, I don't tend to do very well with them. And I'm specifically going to talk about what we do with our time today. Okay? What do we do with our time? And get that up there. So I would say that as a culture, this might be something that you wrestle with yourself, but I find that the culture that we live in, this world, teaches me over and over and over that the most important thing is the now, is the present. I actually read a blog not too long ago that talked about our culture's obsession with the present, with the now. What do I need right now? That's what I'm going to use my time for. Okay, that's what I'm going to spend my time on. What do I feel like? My feelings drive what I'm going to do right now. What matters is living in the moment. And nobody wants to think, in general, the world would say, sure, you got a plan and all these sorts of things, but you just don't know what's around the corner, so you need to worry about the right now, okay? And the end result is, I would say, some dangerous ways of using time, all right? I'll give you some examples. I've told you before that one of my struggles, stupid, one of my struggles is I like to stay up late, because I have so much time. Give all my time to my kids. I give all my time to other things, to people, and I get to the end of the day, and I just want to have some time for myself. And if you're a parent, perhaps, or if you find yourself in a very busy part of your life, maybe you can relate. You get to that time at the end of the day, and it's like, I just want to watch a dumb movie and stay up till 1 in the morning. Woo! And then 6 in the morning comes around, and my son's knocking on the door, Daddy, Daddy. It's like, get away from me. And I'm a cranky parent. I'm mean. I'm a jerk. Well, whose fault is that? It's mine, because I'm not using my time right. I'm living in the now. This is what I need. This is how I feel, and so that's how I'm going to make that decision. That's how I'm going to live, And I see this with many parents. I think you can make an extension there. A lot of parents, there's that pressure to make sure that your kids turn out the right way. And so what do? You spend all your time and all your energy into making sure that your kids turn out just right. And what ends up happening is kids, you see this in our culture, a lot of children start to believe that time, their parents' time, everybody's time revolves around them, you know? And so what ends up happening is because of the use of a parent's time, it's very easily, and this is not always the case, but because of the use of a parent's time, that child might begin to believe that the world revolves around them. Is that a good lesson? And I would say that if you struggle with addiction, that's another one, where living in the now, living in the present, how do I feel? I need this. You know, if there are many forms of addiction out there, and I would say that even children, like I said, I see parents whose addiction is making their children happy at any cost. And I try to remain on guard of that myself, because I don't want my child to think that the main point of life, for example, is that they're happy. I want them to understand that the main point in life, and from my perspective, is that they look to God and find salvation in Him, and He is the one who gives us our time and gives us many things, and those things are not just for me, it's for others. So I guess the point I'm making is if you think about it, you can reflect on that and understand that that's just me sharing. But maybe you can think about in your own life how you've gotten focused on the present, the now, and maybe that's driving how you spend your time. Okay, and that brings me to this whole concept of a community of faith. Why should I commit myself to a community of faith when I have so many things going on? Do you see that? There's a time commitment there. Why should I do that? There are so many things that I could be doing with my life. There's so many things I could be doing with my time. You're like, why are you guys here right now? Why are you here? There's so many other things you could be doing. I'm guessing a lot of you could probably think of things that you need to be doing right now, or could be taking care of, or things get off that checklist, make you feel better, be more at peace, And why in the world would you want to carve out time to be part of a community? Really? I mean, and I run into that all the time where I'll talk to somebody where I say, I think it's a really good thing for you to be part of a community of faith, and I get a lot of pushback sometimes because there's so many other things going on, and I worry sometimes that when I say that with people, the perspective, the thing that people are getting from me is, I want you to come here because it makes me feel good when we have lots of numbers, or something like that, which is entirely not the case. I truly believe that a community a community of faith especially is a vital thing to be carving time aside for. I told you, I shared a little last week about how I think an individual walk with God is incredibly important. But I think coupled with that, it's every bit as important that you're walking with God with other people. About, if you look less than 50 years ago, you would see a different mindset about community in our country. It's really interesting. If you look at our culture and you examine history, not too long ago, if you go like to the mid-20th century, the 1950s, and actually I would say in the 1980s, it was very similar to early 80s, you saw, it just was kind of a given that you belonged to a church. You were part of a church. You were part of a community. That's just, if you said that I'm not a part of a church, people would probably look at you like you're weird or something. I mean, it's just kind of given that you'd say that. At least say that you're part. You were considered a rebel if you're not a part of a church. Now it's actually the opposite. You're kind of a rebel if you are, And if you actually express doubts about God or struggles or anything like that, it's very likely that somebody would look at you and be like, "What's wrong with you? Everybody believes in God." You kind of had that worldview. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that was by and large the case, but that was the culture. That was kind of the culture that we lived in. And today it's a little different. I think there's a lot more doubts and hostility out there, especially towards the church, a body, when I say the church, I'm not talking about institution. I'm talking about a body of believers, okay? There's a lot more hesitation, and any specific claims about a higher power immediately make a lot of people, maybe you find yourself in that boat, kind of holding God at a distance or holding somebody at a distance that would say something specific about God because, well, I can't know, and how can we say all these things, just here some logical questions that people ask. How can you know God is real? Okay, I would say that you can have some very rational arguments to talk about how God's real. In our next series coming up, we'll be dealing with some of these things. How can you trust the Bible? Once again, a very, very good question to ask. Once again, something I'm going to be addressing in a future series, but it's a question people ask. If I'm going to give time to a community and they're going to be talking about the Bible, I got to be able to trust it. How can I know I can trust it? I have so many other things going on in my life. Time is valuable, you see? I even get anxious talking about time. You think about it. And number 3, why commit? Why should I commit my own time to community? See, I take ownership of it. As soon as I find this in my own life, as soon as I start thinking of the things, the blessings in my life as mine, I take ownership of them and I will not give them to anybody else. I do that. I cling to them, and so I guess what I'm saying is that experiences tend to be experiences, and the voice of doubt and hurt tend to speak loudest in our culture. And growing up, even as a kid who grew up as a pastor's kid, growing up, I got mad sometimes on Sunday mornings when my mom would drag me to a faith community. It's like, why am I there? And half the time I'd make them late, and my mom would drag me in, pointing at me the whole time it was my fault that we were late. And I'm like, why are we? It's like just because my dad's a pastor, So I've been there in my life. And before I was a pastor, even there were times where I would make excuses, and I would say, well, I got to do this, or I'm tired, or you know what? That today this is how I feel, and my time could be better used somewhere else. And I would say that the reason why the human fallen condition is always running the show so much is because that argument for personal freedom and autonomy is probably the loudest voice you hear in the world, especially living in the United States. It's a wonderful blessing to be able to have certain freedoms. But a Christ-centered community can be very difficult to commit to, especially when you live in a society that says the most highly valued thing is autonomy and freedom of the individual. And so if with that mindset in play for me, if my life is mine and my time is mine and my time is mine, all these my treasures are mine, then I'm going to look at something like a Christ-centered community, and I'm going to say, what are you going to ask of me? And how are you going to ask me to change? Because I get to choose, you see. And I think it's just to me it's so obvious. It's so obvious why God the Father sent Jesus, his Son, to die on a cross. Because I don't know how else God could have broken through that self-centered, sinful nature of mine. Why should I spend time with a God who's going to ask me to change, or who's going to challenge my worldview, or is going to ask me to think deeper on certain things that I'd rather just think on the surface level and just run on my feelings? I look to the cross and I think, well, if he was willing to do that, maybe he is worth my time. Jesus spoke to a group of people called the Pharisees in his day. These were a group of men who were very, they're very obsessed with the present moment and externals. They're very worried about what other people thought about them, how they looked to other people, and how other people looked, and it was all about the present moment. And I find it interesting to look at what Jesus said to these people. And the Bible speaks in this way in many different ways, but this is specifically how he spoke to the Pharisees. He said, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs." I love this. This is one of my favorite quotes from Jesus. "Whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." What Jesus is saying is they were so obsessed with the present moment and externals and fixing and taking care of and all that stuff in the moment They were shining themselves up. Imagine yourself with a brush, scrubbing yourself up, just getting yourself all neat and nice and on the surface. And he's saying, underneath it all, you can make yourself look good and you can put on a show all you want. And some people, sometimes I get mad at myself because I sometimes can feel myself being pulled in that direction. I just want to look good when deep down inside, I know I'm a corpse. I'm dead inside. My heart is darkened. It's broken. It's sinful. It's turned inward. But on the first surface, everybody sees the perfect me, and I'm great, and everything's nice, So you kind of have that whitewashed tomb, that whole mentality. And sometimes I think, I sometimes view my life in this way where it's almost, I had a job growing up where I was, worked. I actually helped the janitors at our church to clean the floors and do all these different things. And it was a pain cleaning those floors and keeping them nice and tidy. But sometimes I find myself being tricked into believing that my life is like cleaning a floor. That's my life is I'm that deep. Get the surface clean and everything's good, right? That's what I am. Just scrub really hard. Oh, that's really bad, nasty. Just get it really good. And if I can just get it out, my life will be fine, right? My life will be fine. Problem with this is I think that attitude leaves me, and this is me sharing once again, I don't know if you relate or not, but it leaves me vulnerable to distractions and things that are going to appeal to this darkened heart of mine, that are going to pull me away. Because sometimes I want, if everything's good, on the surface, and I can feel God's presence, it's like, oh, I'm all good, I've graduated, or I'm there, and I don't need God anymore. I can kind of get, so this is kind of how we compartmentalize. This is how I do sometimes. It's like, okay, I got, my honey-do list at home. Okay, I finally got the deck finished. Okay, I got that all resurfaced. Good. I got the lawn mowed. Okay, now I can move on to something else. So it's kind of like, okay, my relationship with God's good now. Feel great, everything's good in my life. Some things are, now what's the next thing to do, You see? And you see how that works when it comes to how do I manage my time? I start to say things like, well, it's my time and it's valuable and I have to take care of these other things. Why should I, it's okay if I miss 1 week. Well, friends, what I notice over and over and over, from my perspective, it's interesting because I'm here every week. What I notice is you miss 1 week, what happens? And there's 2. And then what's going on? And then 3. And pretty soon there's a habit. I've graduated, right? That's what I worry about. I worry because I know myself. I know how I operate, and I know that if I don't have that constant contact, I shared with you last week how I have struggled sometimes with being disconnected from God and not having that spiritual individual walk with Him, and it's wreaked havoc on me at times. And I know what happens to me when I'm not gathered with other people, celebrating God's love. I get distracted, and maybe it looks a little something like this. I find myself looking so many different places for peace. If I just get that done, if I just get that taken care of. And it's a slow fade. It's a slow fade. Oftentimes, it's a Casting Crown song too, actually. Good one to check out. It's a slow fade. Um, just starts with little things sometimes. Start pulling you away. Start creating the doubts. Start saying, I don't need this. I'm okay on my own. I'm doing just fine. And then suddenly, what happened? What happened? The reason why we gather at Genesis is because Jesus teaches that he is the only one that provides peace. And the reason why Christ can provide peace that I cannot provide for myself is because when I look to Christ, I don't get a set of checklists. When I look to Christ, I see God looking down on me, saying, you have peace right now. You belong to me. You are my child. You are forgiven. Let some of those things go. Tomorrow will take care of itself. As Jesus said, do not be anxious. The hope of Christ comes from the outside. I say this all the time. It's not an internal thing. It comes from the outside, and then when he provides that healing, that healing truly begins to happen when it penetrates and gets to the heart and touches you where you're most sensitive. I know how we work. I work the same way. I don't want, I may let people in little by little by little, but there's a core in me that I just don't want people to touch. I don't want anyone near there because you know what? It's my greatest fear is to be exposed. But the healing that Christ offers really you begin to see its power when it comes in contact with that exposed root. It's imagine a dentist, they have to numb you up and but imagine that, like somebody touching an exposed root in your mouth, how much pain that would. I mean, it's when Christ touches it, it might be painful at first, it might be emotional, but you know what? It's good. And it allows me to see things in a much more healthy perspective. And you know what? It's a message. It doesn't get old. So many different ways to say it, but yet it's something I need to hear every single day. And there's a certain power of hearing that message amongst a group of people who are just as broken as me, who are just as much in need of God's love as me. 1 Peter 5:8 says this, "Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour." The imagery given here is that Jesus is a shepherd. This is the old school imagery given. Jesus is the shepherd watching over the sheep, and the lion is looking to devour one of those little sheep. So what happens is when you start to wander, what happens? You're putting yourself in a vulnerable state. And you notice that imagery also conjures up an image of a flock, to be part of a community, to be surrounded by other people. Because this devil, he's circling. He's circling, just waiting for one to walk out a little ways. Watching for one to say, you know what, I don't need that shepherd anymore. I'm good. Colossians 3:15 says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in one body, and be thankful." Let Christ's peace rule, not your desire. I like that term, rule. Don't let your own desire, your own sinful nature rule over you. Christ has overcome the world. There's no reason to allow that sinful nature to take over. But I understand there are times when it will, and that's why you need to hear about Christ again and again and again. If you don't believe me yet about the importance of community, Hebrews 10 makes this pretty clear as well. "Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering," which is who God is and how he comes to me through Jesus and how one day he will make all things new, okay? For he who promised is faithful. God is he's not like me. He's not going to make a promise and very likely, fail to keep it. I'm a human being, I'm broken, and so I fail. God is not like us. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. How might we stir one another up? How might we encourage one another? How might we love one another as Christ first loved me, as first loved you? Isn't that an awesome community to be part of? I can't think of anything better. The day is drawing near. What's that day? What's the day when that fallen part of us won't be there anymore? We don't have to worry about it. That's the promise. The promise of God is that through faith in Jesus, you are forgiven now. And the promise is one day you will not have to suffer or struggle anymore. So be of good cheer. Christ has overcome the world. I like to tweak this a little bit to gospel-centered community because the world will say that a faith community is a waste of time, like I said. And going back to the whole idea of time, here in a community, in a gospel-centered community of faith, what you will hear is not what you need to do, what more you need to do. You will hear what Christ has done and how what he has done motivates. How what he has done, how that truth can motivate you to look at yourself differently, can motivate you to look at some of the bad decisions taking place, some of the ways maybe you're using your time. And gathered together with other people, you can hear that from others. So it's not just one person standing up here saying this is true, but you can be around other people saying this is how this has been true in my life. Well, that God's got a point. The hope is that when you gather here, it's not. And once I guess I should change that slightly. It's not about me standing up here and saying something. It's about speaking God's truth, speaking the truth as He has given it through His Word. I'm a fallen person, and I need Jesus. Okay? I know that. And because of that, I know that my time is valuable, and it's important for me to use that to love the people God's placed in my life, to use it to take care of some of the other things in my life. But I also know that because I am fallen, because I need Jesus, I also need to be part of a community. That's why I'm here every Sunday night. You could say it's my job, I guess, but I got the best job in the world. I love it. I get to do this. I get to hang out with you guys. And I look forward to this every single week. If you're somebody who's struggling to find a community, be a part of a community, I would strongly encourage you to make a commitment to just see what happens. To be here every week. If you have time for Bible study, I think it's a great way to grow. We meet on Thursdays. It's great. I always love it because I always learn more. I myself learn a lot of things after hearing people sharing, hearing people talk, share how they hear what God's saying to them, and friends, value this time. Value your communities. Remember, Satan's prowling around like a roaring lion. He is waiting to find someone to devour. And my prayer every day is it wouldn't be me, and it wouldn't be any of you.